Sick and tired of your love-hate relationship with wine?
Welcome to the Feel It Alcohol-Free podcast. Hi, I'm Coach Ruby Williams.
And I'm Coach Susan Larkin.
We're two former wine lovers turned alcohol freedom coaches, exposing the lies about alcohol.
And giving you, our listeners, the tools to break free so you can feel lit.
And when you're lit, you'll feel healthier, freer, and more in control of your life.
So relax, kick back, and get ready to feel lit alcohol-free. Grab our fun bingo card with 21 Feel Lit activities shared on the podcast.
This is a fun way to get motivated to try some new practices in your daily life. Welcome back to the Feel It Alcohol-Free podcast. So excited today to have a special guest. I met Karla. We were both This Naked Mind Path coaches back in my first path group of August 2021. So I'm so excited to have Karla here. She's the co-owner of the Zero Proof Life and the author of She Came Tumbling Down. It's her book. I have it here. I'm so excited to talk about her book. Yeah. In her book, Karla shares her personal journey of triumph over alcohol addiction, offering insight, strategies, and inspiration for those seeking to change their relationship with alcohol. So Karla started her alcohol-free journey in 2014, and we're going to dig in. So welcome, Karla. Hi.
Thank you. It's so good to see both of y'all, you and Susan, and I'm just really honored to be here. So thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. I'm so excited to dig in and find out about your story and your book.
Yeah.
You want to get us started with share a little bit about your life before you made that decision to quit drinking and just, your journey. I'd love
that's a big chunk. So I would probably need to section that off. It became a book. So I probably would need to, section that off. You know what? I think I'd probably start, Ruby, on why I wrote the book and just start there. And then, like I told you, I am an open book when it comes to any questions as to what happened. I mean, anything goes at this point. So, but I wrote the book and it was after the pandemic. Pandemic happened. And we all know, our world's kind of shut down and all the things were happening. And I saw this huge shift in social media and all the memes and you name it, all this stuff around alcohol, the jokes, like it's, basically the acceptance that, any time now was an acceptable time to drink.
Mm-hmm.
And especially
5 o'clock somewhere.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. I mean, oh my gosh, I remember, and I cringed. My mom even shared one, it was just like this, I was like, what's happening? We saw that, the liquor stores and alcohol stores were deemed essential places that needed to stay open. And, I knew the heart of that. I mean, it was but people seeing it so publicized and such a really, truly scary thing. I felt this sudden need, and urge, especially when I started hearing about people getting sick. What was happening in our, emergency departments, again, and we're still seeing the aftermath of the pandemic and what happened to people's health. And one of the biggest groups impacted was young women. Mm-hmm. And I remember hearing that. And I remember just getting this fire in my belly. I was in my driveway and I'd had enough. The combination of all the jokes and all the silliness and, oh, this is so fun, knowing there's a really hard, scary end, to that. It's not funny. It's not, again, the liquor stores are deemed essential because they're afraid people are going to go in withdrawals. That is the truth behind that, And I remember just thinking, I can't stay silent anymore, especially hearing the rise of liver disease and knowing, what people picture when they hear that word. Heaven forbid people still even the word cirrhosis, but also just that combination, that tie to young women. And I was like, I just have got to, I can't be silent anymore. I have to share my story. I want people to know, number one, what can happen, the truth of, this dangerous game that a lot of people are playing. And also the truth of that many people are out there while all these jokes are happening and all these memes are passing around and, just making light of, drinking during the day and all of that, knowing how many people are sitting home scared, knowing they're drinking too much, knowing they're in trouble and knowing they don't know what to do. And so that was the fire that got me to write the book. And believe me, I had to do a lot of work before that to do my own healing, to be able to share, the truth of all of my story, not just parts of it. And that's the thing when you write a book too, you can't really just cherry pick the pretty parts. You really need to share it all. Yeah. And that took time for me to get there. I remember when I was even certified as a coach, I was not sharing my whole story. I was ready to help people with drinking, 100%. I was ready. I knew I, had been alcohol free for some time, but I was not ready to go down the road of talking about the health, and definitely not ready to go down the road of talking about cirrhosis, because that is it was a heavy word for me. And I truly was almost paralyzed by that diagnosis. So it was baby steps for me. And so it was really so cool. And we were talking before this because we all have a mutual coach and friend, Lorna Wilson, and she really taught me the beauty of coaching to really help get me. It took work to get me there. But again, it was a beautiful kind of storm of why that book was put into the world, because I'm loving all the conversations and all the podcasts and all the Instagram influencers and all the conversation around alcohol. The one thing we're not hearing that much is there's a real dark side, and scary things can and do happen, and they're happening a lot. And I want people to know they can find freedom from that too. It doesn't matter where you're at on this, alcohol use disorder spectrum. No matter where you're at, I want people to know you can get through that as well. So
that's so great. You can heal, you can thrive. I remember when I got your book, I stood in the kitchen and just it came in the mail, and I just stood in the kitchen and read the whole thing. I just stood there because I was just like fascinated. And yeah, your vulnerability, it's well written. I think I reached out to you and was just like, whoa. I'm so glad that fire in your belly was, the spirit saying this has to be out in the world, and your bravery to do that was just.
Thank you so much. And there's actually a really, really cool story behind the pictures in the book. And as I was writing the book, I was actually coaching in a group, and it was a group. And these people had no idea. And I think they do, because they're just such great individuals. Were my kind of loading ground to kind of test the waters. Like, I need to start putting this out there. And in that group was a beautiful woman that it just was, again, walking away from alcohol herself and just doing amazing well in the path. And she's an illustrator. So how cool. It gives me chills just thinking about it. To learn the science, to walk through it yourself, to know exactly what I'm trying to be able to put a picture to what I'm trying to say. I don't think it would have happened any other way with anybody else, that you're just trying to describe, the science and what I'm trying to portray in a picture. But she, having that mind of an illustrator and just walking through that herself, did it so beautifully. I was so lucky. And for me, that was just a cool God wink to have that happen. But so she was able to put some of the coolest pictures together, because pictures like that really speak to me, where, there's a lot of words, but when you see that, one of my favorite ones too is the one that's a double page, where it's always it's never a good time. Mm-hmm. And you go through that everything, little thing from, the holidays to there's a wedding, or there's book club, or there's I can't stop yet, because there's always something else. She just did a really, really cool job of that. And I wanted it to be an easy read, because, there is a hard section. Even some of my dear friends when they read the book, they're like, oh my gosh, Karla, I'm sitting there gripping and I know the end. I know you're okay. But I was reading some chapters, bracing myself going, oh my God. It's scary. It's scary, but it is the dangerous truth around this substance.
Yeah.
And it's important because and again, it's not to scare people, but we're also don't need to sugarcoat things and not speak truth around some of them, because I think there's a danger and irresponsibility to that too.
Yeah.
Because everybody is different. Everybody processes alcohol differently. And so what happened to me and what it took for me to get there looked a certain way, but that will look different for someone else. There's not an exact formula. And so I see it as this, it's a dangerous game, that is being played. And it's important for people to know that.
Yeah. Yeah. I really relate. I want to go back and then segue, because I remember being in the pandemic and seeing all those memes. And I remember one that really scared me. It was like an SNL episode or some sort of a comedy show. And they were putting wine or alcohol in baby bottles, and they were having kids sitting at home, at homeschool. And it was about this, just give them alcohol all day. I was just flabbergasted. What? This is in our society right now, that we're supposed to homeschool our kids and give them alcohol. I know it's a joke, but it was kind of really scary for me.
Because those jokes are what have normalized alcohol in the first place. It's we have so normalized being drunk. Oh, it's fun. When we look at the science of it, that's not a funny thing at all of what's actually happening in the body. And I think it's my heart too, because, oh my gosh, we've got to change the narrative. And I want to change the narrative for our kids, because we've got to, we don't want to teach them. And again, think about what was being put out there. Mommy's having a hard day. You're hard. So I drink. So when things get hard, that means you drink. So we're and I don't think anybody's purposely meaning to, no one's purposely trying to teach their kids that. And I know that. So it's not about mom, shaming.
Yeah, we don't want to
moms.
shame the moms. Yeah.
Not at all. But we've got to have these conversations, because they would never intentionally put that message out there. But if we take the defensiveness down and we just really are able to look at it without the blame game, it's a message that's being, told. And it's ooh, I don't want to tell my child that. And so it's being able to have those conversations.
Right. Yeah. And that type of a message, it's really, so Susan and I looked this up. In recent years, a troubling trend that requires attention is the increasing prevalence of alcohol-related liver disease in young women, which is shocking to me, especially the ages of 25 to 34. Yep. So I do want to talk, would you talk a little bit more about being diagnosed? And you were pretty young. I mean, how old?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I believe I was 36.
Wow. See, I think
young.
of liver cirrhosis is someone in their 60s or something, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is and that's why it's important to talk about, because again, liver disease, typically older man, heavy drinker. That is the picture that people get. There's another great illustration in the book too of what alcohol use disorder looks like. Oh my gosh, she nailed that. It's one of my favorites. And especially when it happened to me, that's when, again, this is obviously pre-pandemic and all of that, there was already a big spike, and it was young women. And I fell right into that category of, liver disease. And so I think it's important for people to know too, I was a working person. I was working on a Friday and, hospitalized on a Sunday. Now, again, was everything peachy clean? Absolutely not. I describe what we say in the South as a hot mess. I felt I was a hot mess. I was a combination of, I didn't know what it was like to feel good anymore. Because a lot of people were asking me about warning signs, and I totally get that. And yes, my body was giving me signs, but I didn't know it. Because here's the thing. For me, my anxiety was very physical. It made me feel physically bad, upset stomach, panic attacks, that feels debilitating, all of this stuff. So I like to tell people a lot of times your body's giving you signs all the time, but it's going to show up as going to your doctor for anxiety, going to your doctor for high blood pressure, all these things, which can be other things. And it's in the background. It's like this dark thing. I always say it's the missing piece of the puzzle. And also, meanwhile, I was not being honest about how much I was drinking. So, my healthcare providers, I'm not telling them the full story. Yes, I forget how much I would say. I would just, yes, I drink, wine at 9. I have my glasses of wine at night, but that's not it. I'm just paralyzed. I mean, I was just always blaming my anxiety. Meanwhile, with zero clue of the tie between alcohol and anxiety. I didn't learn that until I was alcohol free. And that you could have knocked me over with a feather. I did not know that. And it truly so much that I remember Googling, and this was a while after I got sick, but I Googled, where did my anxiety go? Because one of my biggest fears when I was, again, didn't want to stop, because what was I going to do? It was the only thing that helped me with my anxiety. So I'm hanging on to this thing. And I remember after a while feeling this very foreign feeling of calm, because I didn't know what that felt like, but now I know my nervous system, was just kind of settling in. It was just, so I remember Googling, where did my anxiety go? Because it was just this, I couldn't understand it. So I definitely embraced it. But going back, I just will never forget. And one of the vulnerable parts in the book, and I actually shared this in one of our path groups, in a big path group. And I remember, because there was definitely shame around it. That's why I kept it to myself. And the reason why I put it in my book was because I shared it in a big group. And it was that first group that I shared about me looking at the whites of my eyes when I would get into my car and going to work. I would pull out in my driveway, and I would look in the rearview mirror and look at the whites of my eyes. And, if that didn't tell you, my subconscious was worried. I was worried. I was worried about my drinking, and I knew enough to know that, if there's something wrong with your liver, it shows up as yellow. And so I would just do this check. But the cool thing was when I spoke that out loud in that group that day, I got so many messages from people saying, oh my gosh, I do the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. And it gave them this freedom to say, oh, because you don't feel good about it. You don't know how to explain that. You clearly know you don't like where you're at, and you're worried because you're looking at the whites of your eyes and then not doing anything about it. It's hard to understand. But when we're in that pattern, we're just in that pattern, and you're not, until you know and you can step away from it. Your brain is always going to seek out, that alcohol. So I didn't know any of that, but it started with me doing my routine look. And then one day, and there was yellow, and I've heard in movies before where it's like that, where your body runs cold. And I never have experienced that feeling that day. I did, though. In my car, it was like that ultimate, paralyzing fear of, oh my God, what am I going to do? But then again, what swoops in immediately takes over is I got to keep pushing forward. I'll fix it. I had gone through years of let me just finish this work thing. This particular time, I happened to be in a wedding. I got to get through this. I'm going to get through that, and then I'm going to fix it. Then I'm going to share. Then I'm going to talk about it. And for some reason, that in itself gives us this overwhelm, okay, I'm off the hook and I'll fix it. And my body had a different plan. My body, I truly describe it as there was going to be no more pushing forward. And my body just said, I can't do it anymore, And I had shared with my now husband. My husband is amazing. He was my boyfriend at the time. And golly, most people run for the hills. What's happening? But he clearly did not. But I shared with them. They took me. And again, I was surrounded by healthcare providers. They were all physicians. My husband's a physician. Took me to the emergency room. And that's where, again, I just saw my body morph into something. It was really quite scary. And, there was a lot of kind of quick testing. They ended up releasing me, with the promise of doing blood work. And I think in just hopes to see what my body was going to do. And I did get the blood work, and I knew things were really bad. And that's where I got the phone call from Dr. Jofflin, who Dr. Jofflin, by the way, is the one that wrote the foreword of the book. Okay. She is amazing. We're still in contact to this day. She's such a big part of my story. But it was that phone call that I got that they had gotten the results of my blood work. And when something, is a critical lab result, doctors see it immediately. It kind of skips to the top of everything else. And that's when I describe it to people. All my control, I'm just going to fix it. I'm just going to fix this. I'm going to get through this and just fix it. It's like all my plates came tumbling down, because that's when she said, at that point, my last name was Miss Kepper, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I think I'm dying." Because I remember I was asleep when she called, and it was hard to even wake up. I was just like super groggy. And she said, "I think you are too." And that's when everything left my body. Like it just, and that's my heart, y'all. Like that, I don't want people to be there. And that's why I share. That's why because there's a very big real reality of what I went through and the touch and go, because we did get to that point where there was nothing they could do. They got me there. They took care of me the best I could, but it was a waiting game. What is your liver going to do? And that's another thing that just makes me cringe when people are like, oh, it regenerates and it heals itself. And it's like, we take advantage of this amazing, amazing organ in our body that is fighting so hard for us. And we keep putting this stuff in it, and you keep it, it will just regenerate. Well, there's a time then there's no turning back, and I can't do that anymore. And I feel so, honestly, it is, I know that I'm here for a reason. And that was my nudge too. I'm here to share my story, and that I'm here for a reason. I know God saved me for a reason. And it was not to keep my mouth shut and just not tell anybody about it, because I was trying to do that. I was trying to just sit back and just say, okay, I'm good. But, there's people that are in the exact same position I was, and there is nothing they can do, and they're gone. And that's happened. It happens to people all the time. And no one talks about it. And because there's still, as much as we have made so much headway, with talking about alcohol. I mean, I am so excited about all of the headway that we've made with, just destigmatizing so many people, just choosing to not drink. And so many people just I want to do this for my health, understanding all these health things coming out, the American Cancer Society, all these things. They're such big wins, but there's still so much shame there. And especially for those what happened to me, because then there can even be a sense of oh, you were bad. I mean, I've gotten that before. I mean, I was bad, but you were really bad. And there's a disgust there. And so I'm just so grateful, because I would have been one of those people. I would have been one of those people that slipped away, that I would have been begging my family to please not tell anybody. Oh my God, because that was my biggest fear, of people finding out my horrible secret about myself. And that would have been it. And I'm so glad that I'm here. I'm able to tell it. I'm able to share with, oh my gosh, my nieces and nephews that are now teens, and they understand, they know what happened. They read the book. I'm here we go. And it was just the coolest thing, because they mean the world to me, and those kids, and obviously my daughter too. But she said, I said, well, I didn't want y'all to be embarrassed of me when I wrote the book. I didn't want to embarrass them. And she said, oh, Auntie Lala, are you kidding me? It's such a flex. My aunt is an author. And I was and I just sobbed, and she has no idea what that means to me. But the keeping silent is such a dangerous thing. And we're just missing out on so much if we try and hold on to those things. But yeah, so the diagnosis didn't come till later. Cause again, when you're sick like that, it's very acute. So they're just, it's like a wait and see. Let's see, like, how does the body, and once you heal some, then they can do testing. For me, it was a biopsy to see. And I think, what is, cirrhosis? And it's again, big, scary word, but the way I described it to Lorna, and that's where I found so much healing, because I could not even say the word, but she, my coach had me describe to her, okay, what is it? I don't even know what is this cirrhosis that you're talking about? And it was kind of like I described it the way it was described to me. I was like, when we fall and we hurt ourselves and we then heal and we have a scab, there's a hardening. Yeah. And that's the danger. There's a hardening to the liver. And so, that whole regeneration and all the cool stuff that it does, that hardening, it can no longer do that.
Right.
And the worst, and there's different stages, there's all kinds of complexities that I don't even want to get into, because I just know that is what the description that made sense to me. But when I was able to describe it to her, I said, so it's like my wound. It's like my battle wound. And there was something about the word battle wound that was able to flip things around for me and be able to stop looking at what happened in so much shame and truly start to flip it into awe of what my body did for me. What my body and all the science that, Susan and Ruby, we've all learned now as coaches, and we share with people all the science and understand, like, the poison and what it's when we drink it and what it turns into, and all the science. Instead of being so shocked, how did that happen to me? I can honestly say, I'm like, how did it not happen sooner? And, because it's also not just drinking. Like, it's like, okay, high stress, you're drinking. It's the high stress. No coping mechanisms, no good tools, eating poorly, not sleeping.
Mm-hmm. Not sleeping is huge.
Yeah, huge.
Huge.
So then
that's
you put all of those things together, and then I'm looking at them like, good gravy. I'm glad I made it to 36. And so it was just really a turnaround that was so important for me to be able to get to, or else I wouldn't have been able to share everything, because I do think it's so important. We've got to change the face of, cirrhosis, old man. That's not the case anymore. I've saw there's people in the keyboard warriors is what I call them. And like, they love to act like they know everything. Like, cirrhosis only happens to, chronic drinking for years and years and years, and when you're older. And that's just not true. And Dr. Jofflin, who wrote, the foreword of my book, gosh, she's so amazing. And Dr. Sarah Allen, who wrote the afterword, had two amazing, just quite frankly, badass women that were there, and they treated me, and they will always be a couple of my favorite people. But how beautiful that they were kind of my book too, the foreword and the after. And, one of them said, you've got to write this. I mean, Karla, you've got some serious street cred. Okay. Like, that is I'm like, that is true. But for her to be treated like a human and have that empathy come in and have the understanding of, because quite frankly, you can have a medical degree and you could be using alcohol just like everybody else does.
Absolutely.
They're not learning about, I would love, my dream one day is to, need to go ahead and put that out there, is to have, like, I want to have people do a 0 Proof Life challenge and have that be part of residency. You need to do, in part of your high stress residency, you need to go through, a 30 or 60 day challenge and learn the science, learn what it does, learn and have it be part of your teaching tool. Because it's really quite fascinating, but they don't know all those things.
What a great idea.
They're using alcohol, right? So I need to, keep putting it out there. They're human too. Mm-hmm. And they're growing up with the same messaging of hard day after work. I'm stressed. I had several friends that are doctors that wrote me after the book came out. And that was so beautiful. Just really cool conversations of, not shame, not blame, not, oh, that's why I can't stand the word alcoholic, throwing that word out the window and just having the conversation of, man, I found myself, Karla, after a long shift going and saying, I deserve, and I'm stressed, or hearing those words come out of my mouth. I've had a stressful day. I need a drink. And it made me pause. Y'all, what kind of movement could we make in this world if we all just could like do that and go, wow, that made me pause. Let me think about that. You know, that's all I want to do. It's kind of like our conversation about moms earlier. No one's saying anybody's a bad mom. Let's just pause and just go, oh, wow, I don't want to send that message. And so that was another, cool thing about the book is like, I was writing it for the me, like that person.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted someone to have hope. I wanted, again, like I was saying, to get the picture out of their head of the old sick person, the person on the street, the person that's lost all their jobs, that's had DUIs, all of that, and get that picture. And I wanted people to have another face, but healthy and living life, feeling lit, all of these things. Like I wanted people to have that go, wait a minute. I want that and I can do that, and that was really my drive. And because we do, and I think it's important in changing the narrative and changing the conversation and all of those things.
Karla, you are such a badass. I love everything you're saying. And you segued it perfectly because I was going to ask you next, like, what do you do in your life to feel lit, alcohol free?
You know what? I am so glad this was perfectly timed because I just recently, because number one, I think feeling lit is a continuum, right? Like it's learning all the little things. And I recently did with my fellow Zero Proof Life coaches, did a dopamine detox. And y'all, it was fascinating. Number one, I needed to stop and pause and look at myself because, it was, things started to eerily seem similar of the escaping, like getting up, scrolling. And that was kind of like an escape. And the thing that hit me the most is one thing that we've learned with, alcohol is that, other things don't seem as fun. And that's because of all the, hedonic threshold, all the sciencey stuff I won't get into. But I started to notice, oh my gosh, I'm not excited about reading at night anymore. I used to love to like have a good yummy drink and a good book. I would get giddy over that. And I wasn't. I was scrolling. That was winning over things. So I did a dopamine detox and I was blown away in just a short time. I think I ended up doing 72 hours. It was very eye-opening. My creative side came back out. My reading, again, sleep immediately changed. So I can't recommend that enough. I'm going to keep doing that. That's my now plan is like, okay, how do I make this, immerse this and do this all the time? Or just how am I going to make it look? But that made me feel so lit and it made me feel so productive and just energized and all of that. And it truly, I would recommend that to anybody is just taking a look at that.
What is a dopamine detox? Like real quickly, like what?
Yeah, real quick. There's a book and I can send you the link. It's super inexpensive on Amazon, but I honestly, they don't even need to get a book. I made it look right for me. I knew where I was being pulled. So for example, and you set up rules before you do it. So what is your dopamine detox going to look like? Some people, they are too aggressively out there exercising and that's that was not my problem. So I did not put that in I was like, girl, I need to get out and walk. There was nothing wrong with that. So you make it look right for you. For example, my daughter and I decided that we weren't going to do YouTube or Netflix, but we would allow during that 72 hours documentaries. And that was something but we would do it together, and no social media. So I completely got off social media, and it was so freeing. So that's what my specific one looked like.
Okay.
And I would encourage people, again, where you're being pulled, and make sure it's a little uncomfortable, because for me, removing Instagram and TikTok, that's where I scroll. It made my palms sweat a little bit. I'm like, oh my gosh.
So it's only 72 hours, but like your palms are sweating. Yeah.
And we were all floored. And I think it was because I was afraid, what am I going to see? And it was like the truth of how many times did I go to grab my phone? How many times? Because I was using it as a reward through work. I was like, let me finish this project, and then I'm going to treat myself and go scroll. And I'm like, ooh, I felt a little hypocritical. I was kind of feeling that conviction. But again, so it was no social media, and we watched documentaries. I ended up getting some crossword puzzles, some good things at night, some good books. And I really, that shift. And the cool thing too, though, is the shift really did happen almost immediately. Kind of got it out of my system, and definitely
I'm going to try it. You talked me into
Yay, please. I'm telling you, it was eye-opening. And as a coach, it gave me so much to be able to share. As a mom, it helped me with okay, because we're heading into the stages of, of course, wanting phones and wanting all that stuff. And again, I think the cool thing is it's not about blame. If people understood the science, and that's exactly what's happening on the scroll pull, is it's not you. It's just what happens. And so you're not weak. You're not slack. It's just what's going to happen. So I highly recommend it.
Thank you.
Do you recommend doing it once a month? I've been trying to do once a week, one whole day.
Yes, I would. And that's because our thing was, and we might even bring it into our groups, that our Zero Proof Life group is doing it monthly in the group. That was my thing, of definitely do it monthly. I like your idea, Susan, of doing it weekly. I think it's just like anything. Once you got off that detox, it's like people then going back to moderate, right?
Yeah.
You're going to be right back to where you were. And then you just feel like, I feel bad. So you need to then go at it with a plan. And I think that's where I'm at now, is because with work, I am on social media, and I am, on Instagram and things like that. But how can I marry those two and make it look right? And maybe that will be weekly. I'm not sure, but definitely monthly is happening. I just went on vacation. We made sure that we did it during that. And making it look right for you, I think what's important.
So inspiring.
That's so great. Yeah.
Well, your book is just so inspiring, your whole story and journey, and how open you are. Karla, this has been such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
As a guest.
Yeah. This has been fun. Y'all, anytime. You just let me know.
So real quick, where can people find you and find your book?
Yeah. You can find my book, and She Came Tumbling Down, and that on Amazon. I have my website, and it's, karlaadkins.com. You can find out everything that I'm doing. The Zero Proof Life we have a really fun Instagram page, but a community, and where we do, we do alcohol-free challenges, but just a beautiful community where people are there to support each other. And so you can find us there at the Zero Proof Life.
Thank you so much, Karla.
Thank y'all for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Feel Lit Alcohol Free Podcast. Do you have a question you'd like us to answer on the show?
All you need to do is head over to Apple Podcasts and do two simple things. Leave a rating and review telling us what you think of the show. And in that review, ask us any questions you have about breaking free from wine or living an alcohol-free lifestyle.
That's it. Then tune in to hear your question answered live.
And remember, do something today that will help you feel lit.
Don't forget to get your free Feel Lit bingo card.
Link in the show notes.